you know, addressing this topic, finding margin before you grow, and the core things that we're going to talk through today, like it- like finding margins easy for me just to waltz in and say, hey, you need to get more profitable. Easy to say, but really hard to do. Like obviously you can just cut overhead, right? Just trim your subscriptions and cut some expenses, and you'll find a little bit of margin there. But that's only going to get you so far. And the biggest margin is hidden on that wage line item on the profit and loss, especially for agencies. We're a service business. It's a huge part of the expense line of a business, and that's where it's hiding. So like the other simple thing to do, and we could cut this webinar short, is great. Cut your staff and you'll find margin. That's easy to do. But if they're billable staff, you're going to lose clients. So you can maybe cut non-billable people, but that'll only get you so far as well. And the alternate is part of that challenge, which is if you have to hire team members every time you land a new client, you're not actually growing your margin, you're just scaling your problem. So like, I think to frame it through my simple CFO lens is like, how do we decouple that wage expense item on your P&L from your revenue? And how do we decouple those to grow the output and the revenue, but not necessarily grow the headcount? And a lot of this involves the combo of finance and operations, which is why this is a great topic to chop it up with you on. That's kind of how I'm seeing this challenge, and hopefully we can explore it a bit together, but I'll let you outline the plan.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So just before we do jump into it, we had nearly 100 people register for this, which is awesome. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will try and get to them towards the end. We'll see how we're doing for time, but please drop them in the chat and we'll do our best. Okay, so the plan for today. First up, we're going to talk briefly about capacity in an agency, what it is and how you measure it. Then we'll move to addressing over-servicing and other challenges causing revenue leakages from an otherwise busy agency. And then finally, and kind of the real meat of it, we'll talk about how to plug those revenue leaks and how to drive greater margin from your existing team. So some good stuff. Let's get into it. But first, Michael, you recently ran a survey of over 100 agencies diving into their finances. Great initiative. I know you've got a lot of data to get through and you're still getting through it, but what are some of the key initial findings that you're seeing? What stood out?
Yeah, so I'll quickly throw up some slides that'll help frame this chat nicely. The first one is the operational and scaling challenges out of the data. So this is over 100 Aussie indie agencies, some New Zealand ones in there as well. You can see delivery capacity is the number one challenge, 31% of respondents, and then utilization/time management is the second most popular, 28% of respondents. So by far and away, the biggest challenges facing an agency. And that's why I think it's a great topic to dive into. And that's, part of the reason why we're here to help kind of share some ideas to help with those challenges. And then that's kind of the operational capacity thing that we're going to try and address. The other really interesting stat that I think we should cover today is time tracking. So we asked a question on time tracking. Do you trust it? Do you do it? And do you trust it? You can see 40% do it and trust it. But the interesting thing out of this year's results is that 34% of people said yes, but it's inconsistent or we don't fully trust the data. And then when you dive into this middle column here, the 33% that clicked on that, they are far, far and away the biggest in the low profit category. So this is just showing people with that low net profit, 0 to 10% net profit of that previous slide. So the people who have inconsistent or don't trust their time tracking data are overrepresented in that 0 to 10%. So the agency is lower profit and struggling, which is connected, we believe, to not fully trusting the data. So that those 33% of people. So that's kind of the really interesting stat that I think is worth maybe teasing out and exploring and maybe giving some people ideas about why that's the case and where that margin is leaking. So I think we'll release the full report later this month. We'll talk about it maybe at the end, but those I think were the key stats that are really interesting for us to chat through today.
Yeah, fantastic. There's some really good numbers, or good numbers in terms of illuminating numbers, not good numbers in terms of objectively positive.
Yeah. So you're the ops specialist on this one. So I want you to maybe frame it for people about what is capacity, how do you measure it? Let's just set the scene before we dive into tactical stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I would define capacity, and I think generally accepted define capacity as being the ability to do the work that you're currently contracted to do. Usually it's as simple as work takes X time, we have Y hours available. One of the key tensions in this webinar, though, is around actual versus perceived capacity. So on paper, I have capacity, but I feel my team feels busy. So those numbers don't always necessarily match up. And that working to that feeling causes you to make bad decisions here. It causes you to hire too quickly, for example, kind of what we started talking about before. You win a client, go, oh no, then you need to hire, or you feel like you need to hire someone. So it's getting a better handle on that. In terms of measuring it, it's really three core things. One is planned or forecasted or contracted work. What have we agreed to do? One or the next one is the estimated time to complete that work. So whether or not, whatever your pricing model, that's irrelevant right now, there should be an estimated amount of time to actually get that work done. And then finally, the estimated time available on your team. We're buying 38 hours, say, of a team member's time every week. We should therefore have an idea of what our capacity in terms of the ability to deliver actually is. And then finally, you need to supplement that with the backwards looking, and it is backwards looking, time tracking. So the actuals, where is the team spending time?
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Makes a lot of sense to me. So let's dive into the next section. I think I just wanted to quickly outline that this isn't about like showing hours to clients. So
yeah, that's right.
I wanted to put that on the board that we're not suggesting as a pricing strategy you should be showing, here's our menu of 10 hours for X dollars. That's like, for me, proprietary IP, and it doesn't matter to the client. I've had clients where we're dealing with big corporates and they want to see hourly breakdowns, but you end up just fudging the numbers to like get the math to work for what you need. So you people still play around with it. But for me, it's like, as you said, a basic law of gravity. We're buying 38 hours. How are we investing it? And I think it's most interesting for the internal stuff, for how's our client profitability going? How are each of our clients going? And that's where I reckon is the best place to use it. But the core tension of this, and why so many people, like if we go back to that slide, so why do so many people inconsistent or don't trust the data? That's still a huge amount of people that are like having a crack at it, but they're not really getting much out of it. So I wanted to throw it to you about like simple, in theory, 2-track time. Why is it so hard to do, Sam?
Well, I mean, first up, like no one particularly likes tracking time. I think on the list of tasks that you have to do, time tracking kind of sucks the most. It's a pain. It's just more admin. And depending on how you've sold it into the team, it can feel kind of Orwellian as well, like you're watching their every movement. I mean, we know that none of us have time to dive into individual time logs. And for most of us, we don't kind of care that much. We care about the overall picture. But that can be how it feels to the team. So there can be a little bit of pushback there. So in that instance, there's perhaps no malice or anything. It's mostly just inconvenient and a habit that they haven't formed, that they don't want to form. So it just gets a little bit difficult. The other end of the spectrum, though, and this is less common, but it does occur, is when certain people aren't used to being held accountable to what they are or aren't delivering, and they're not particularly interested in starting to be held accountable. And then that's a harder nut to crack, right? Because we're talking about a cultural issue or like an individual's values alignment issue.
Yeah. And I've seen that happen first time where we've like the founder started to do this and then people churn out because they don't like that more like performance-driven culture, and they self-select and find another job somewhere else where it's a bit cushier, where they can cruise and not get asked questions about what they're doing.
Yeah, and not everyone who is bad at time tracking is like that, but we definitely need to be aware, right, where there's a million reasons why or excuses as to why it's not happening, that maybe there's something a little bit more nefarious going on than just being a hard habit to establish.
Yeah, for sure. And so like that's the cultural challenge of like why it's a hard mountain to climb. If you begin this journey, like how does someone move from not reliable to reliable? Like how do they get data they can rely on?
So the first thing is to make it as easy and frictionless as possible. If we kind of accept the premise that time tracking sort of sucks as a task, then we just need to make it as easy as possible. That usually will mean integrating it well with your PM system or your task management system so that it can all happen from one place. We don't want the team having to log into 5 different tools in order to just do the doing. So we need to make that as easy as possible. If you don't have a PM system that it integrates well with, just simple buckets, delivery, client service, unbillable, something like that. The next one, and this is really important, ensuring the team understands the why behind it. So it's not about micromanaging, it's about ensuring we're all getting paid properly for the time taking to complete the work. Setting up accountability and ownership. So each person's direct manager should be calling in on their team about their time logs rather than it being purely top down. We want to try and push it down to the lowest reasonable level and then have it build up from there. You can automate a lot of reports out of most of them too, which is good. Updating role descriptions. I love operational excellence as being part of a role description. That's doing all this stuff right. You can be great at the doing, but if you're not ticking the operational excellence box, you're underperforming. And then finally, and I do think this is most important, particularly if we accept the premise that no one likes tracking time. If you have a client everyone knows is overserviced, the data tells you that they're overserviced. You as the founder or leader of the agency need to have that difficult conversation with the client and you need to rectify it. If the team is doing the hard work in tracking their time, it's disrespectful to them to then just ignore the problem that they're servicing for you, and they will see that. So that then starts this negative feedback loop, this spiral where suddenly no one's tracking time anymore because what's the point?
Yeah, for sure. And you can create a positive loop of that, which is when you protect them and you step in because a client's being too needy and you either upsell or move them on so they feel like it's actually working in their advantage. One idea I see is like this tests a lot of founders' leadership. Like this is like it's easy to throw a Christmas party and get people to attend because it's the fun part, but like getting people to do something that's basically more work for them isn't like an easy idea to sell. And I feel like this is a big test of people's leadership, how they can get something out that no one really wants to do because it's in the structural best interest of the business. And especially the one in terms of pushback I see is when founders have like long-term employees that have been with them for a while and they're kind of like, they're not, necessarily the GM, but they're just like entrenched employees who have been there forever who resist it. And they find it hard to like push back on those people. I don't know if you've seen any of that or any ideas about how to, crack the whip, but it's like, it's carrot or stick, right?
Yeah, and you absolutely have to start with carrot with this sort of stuff. Go in that, with the assumption, people who are struggling, they've got the best of intentions. Assume, an issue with competence rather than an issue with malice.
Yeah.
But at some point, you do need to move to something a little bit stricter, a little bit more, perhaps moving to something slightly more punitive. But you absolutely don't want to start there. You want to start with, we need to explain the why, bring the team on the journey, and then start getting that good data. And if not, it's a performance issue.
Yeah, cool. And so let's talk tools. Is there like one software tool to rule them all in the world of time tracking? What have you seen rolled out across your experience?
They all basically do the same thing. I don't have strong preferences here. I think there's a bunch of good ones. EverHour, Harvest, Toggle. Like if you think about it mechanically, it's a start-stop button and a sign. Like it doesn't matter that much. What matters is, does it integrate with your PM tool? That is easily the most important. And then you're looking for things like, can you put in budgets for retainers v projects? Can you put in charge out rates? Can you put cost rates? All that sort of stuff. But most importantly, it's, does it integrate with your PM tool? That's kind of it. That will make it a hell of a lot easier to use and uptake will be way better.
Yeah, I like it. And like I've seen people get started with a spreadsheet, like just anything to get the team starting to do it, and building like that habit and the culture is by far the harder part, rather than making it some tool. Like if you don't follow people up, they won't use it anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So let's assume then, Michael, that the agency has good data. What metrics do you look at as a CFO to spot over-servicing issues?
Yeah, so there's a handful that I like to use. So assuming that we have time data to use, let's assume best case to start. Effective hourly rate is probably the one that I use. So that's at a very simple level. How much dollars is the client giving us? How many hours did we spend on that client? And you divide the dollars by the hours, and that gives you your effective hourly rate in reality of what you kind of did. You just compare that to what you put on your price and quote in terms of your charge out rate and see, are we under or over? And that will help you spot the over servicing. And the key of that is that it's done on a client basis. So it's like a project or a particular retainer client. So you can see who your problem clients are and see if that's trending over a period of time. And if it's just a one-off anomaly, that's okay. But if it's happening consistently month on month, then clearly there's a structural problem. And my favorite conversation when we're looking at client profitability is when one-off issues happen every month. And it's like, oh no, that was just this one-off thing they needed. And then the next month rolls on. So you can only pull that one-off issue a couple months before it gets a bit thin and you need to look at it.
Yeah.
So effective hourly rate, classic service business one. And then utilization rate, which I know you kind of cover a little bit data, but that's just what percentage of time in a week are people spending on actual billable work. But you don't want to just use that because people might be throwing heaps of hours at an unprofitable client. So you want to use both the client profitability analysis plus that in combo. But I get a lot of, especially new clients who get in touch who don't have time tracking data to start. They haven't, they haven't been red pilled on time tracking. So as the CFO, we look at staff cost as a percent of revenue. So total team cost divided by the revenue. That's a rough one you can do for most businesses right now. Okay range is 55 to 60%. Elite would be like 50% or below. And, you want to be taking a good look at it. If you're above 65% of revenue, that's unsustainable. You need to think about restructuring and stuff as a rough range. And then finally, probably the last one is revenue per full-time employee. That's trying to get a bit of a read on the efficiency of your team. And so that looks at like your headcount, your full-time equivalent headcount compared to your revenue levels. And you roughly want to be earning about 200K Aussie for every one full-time employee for the ratio to be in balance. And you track that over months as well and have a look at trends, stuff like that. So those are like the metrics, the nerdy things to look at to see, are we over servicing or are we inefficient? But the last point of that is just, this is like insidious. It sneaks up on people. No one sets out to do it. And you need constant vigilance and accountability, which is why the time tracking data helps with it. And it often starts if you lose one or two big clients, but you don't restructure, like you're loyal to your team, but then that work that people are doing expands. And so their existing clients get more love because you're too scared to lose them. You want to make sure you keep the ones you've got because you've just lost two. But that is where kind of the genesis of a lot of over-servicing happens because, they need to spend their time somewhere. So they obviously want to be productive to the business, but that also means that their work week expands and they don't have any spare time when you want to add them another one. And this little graph here charts it perfectly. It's called Parkinson's law. And basically the law says work expands to fit the time available. And you can see if we're giving them 2 hours, they'll crank it out. But if you've got 8 hours in the day with no other clients, you'll stretch it out and you'll get used to that, which is why it's so painful when you try and drive performance and add more clients. Staff push back and say, I'm too busy. But it's just that their level of busyness has shrunk because they haven't known what it's like to actually fly at that higher altitude for a while. So that's part of it.
I always refer to that as like, it's almost like fitness, right? If your body is used to running 5K or 10K or whatever, and suddenly it's just running 3K consistently, your level of fitness adjusts. You're not going to be able to suddenly jump back up to 10. So part of it is absolutely the time expands, but also the team is just not used to working at that level anymore. So, I mean, things that I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Michael, as well, if you have any, but things that I've seen that have worked really well when someone does lose a client, but then has decided to keep the team, they're able to do that, is making it really clear that client's engagement or those clients that they still have, those engagements haven't changed. They're still the same. They're still doing the same amount of hours or the same amount of output or something like that every single month. But now we're saying, all right, we're now going to put an additional 20 hours of your time every month to our marketing. Do some case studies, develop some IP, come up with some fancy models that we can throw in a sales deck that we can call proprietary, like any of that sort of stuff. But box that out, give that a budget in terms of time, and that's the budget that they have to hit. If you're going to do more work on existing clients because you want to show them more love and keep them around, do the same thing, time box it so that you're saying we're going to spend an additional 10 hours on this client, no more, no less, but then also communicate that to the client so they know you're going over and above. One of the big risks with over-servicing, and what we're talking about now is over-servicing, doing more work than you're getting paid for, is that the client gets used to that. They get used to that level of output. They get used to that level of outcome or deliverable. And then when you pull that away, they feel that. As humans, we feel loss way more than we feel gain. So they will notice, oh, okay, yeah, I'm getting a little bit more than usual. And then quickly, that's the norm. We pull back to whatever they're actually paying for, and they feel that as pain. So you need to be careful about doing that extra work for clients, for existing clients, without communicating that clearly upfront. Have you seen any kind of good ways to manage that, Michael?
You whittle it back to core principles. You've hit the nail on the head, which is resource plan the hours you're going to do, and then deliver on them. So whatever that task is, if it's billable work, that's great. But as you said, if it's just that time becomes non-billable work, but it's still a measured output and a set number of hours, that's still maintaining that like internal discipline to sticking to the structure that I think is really the core principle of like the high profitable agencies. They know where the time is going. It's measured. They make a clear decision on it, and then they can do it. So I think nothing to add. I think that's exactly the right way to do it.
Cool. And if anyone here hasn't looked at their effective hourly rate before, it's a real kick in the teeth the first time you do it. I still remember the first time I did that when I was running an agency years and years ago, thinking, we bill out at 225, 250 an hour, whatever it might be. That's kind of what we target in the back end. And then seeing, because we're over servicing clients, that number's actually in the ones somewhere. That's where the margin's going. A team is working for, 2x their salary or something. Okay, I get it now.
And that's like, charge out rate's a bit of a hidden ego metric too. No, we charge out at 350. We're a high, we are a top quality branding agency. We only do great work. We are highly paid. But as you said, you throw more hours at it, your rate's not 350. It can say that on the card, but in reality, it's not. It's good for your ego to say that you're expensive, but like, what are you actually taking home? So that's the reality check people need. So those are like the metrics, high level of what I look at. But what about like operational lens? Where do you see, revenue leakage once you've got this time tracking data? People have come in and used you, and they've got it up and running. What do you see from an operations perspective?
So the big one is kind of what we've already touched on a little bit, which is that the client work doesn't match what we're actually getting paid for, what the engagement is. So over-servicing. Under-servicing is a problem too, not super relevant here, but we also don't want to under-service clients. Obviously, it's not the right thing to do, but an under-serviced client will leave. Where you are over-servicing client, you can reframe that to being an upsell opportunity, right? There's obviously a need there. You're not doing that work just because it's fun for the most part. You're doing it because there's a need there, either driven by the client or driven by the team. So you need to have that conversation with the client. We've been delivering X, you're paying for Y. It's going to cost Z to keep doing that. So having the conversation about scope meeting what's actually happening, that can be a difficult conversation to have, but we just need to be brave. You cannot, as I've already kind of telegraphed before, just pull it back in the background, because clients will feel that. If you've been delivering 15 widgets per month and suddenly you're delivering 10 widgets per month because they're only paying for 10, they're going to notice that there's a 33% drop in widgets. They'll feel that. So you need to have that conversation. Don't try and hide it in the background. The next one is look at what's being marked as billable or non-billable. It's pretty easy to accidentally hide time as being non-billable, as training or whatever. The rule for client work, and another one, non-billable work for clients kind of can get hidden sometimes, either inadvertently or intentionally. The rule of thumb that I like to use is, would I be doing this work if we didn't have the client? Say for a few edge cases like invoicing, that kind of covers pretty much everything. And it might even be driving to client site because they want someone there in person. For some engagements, that might include flying down to see them for the workshop they wanted. We need to be capturing all of that and reporting and including that.
Yeah, like, is the meeting before the client where you work out your plan of attack billable? It's
Yes.
like the meeting before the meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're often not budgeted though.
No, you're right. They're definitely not. So it's that sort of stuff that even when you're starting out time tracking, if you've never done it before, if you kind of haven't included all of these other meeting before the meetings in the initial scope, track all of it. You get an accurate picture and then make decisions. Don't manipulate the picture and then try and make decisions off a fabricated image. Try and get an accurate image from the beginning.
Yeah, and I've seen agencies had a lot of success just working out what that structure is they promise and change that, and it's had a huge unlock about like maybe it's not everyone in that meeting. Maybe the cadence of the meetings is less. Like look at the structure of what you're promising to cut back to.
Yeah, absolutely. I would also be looking at how much admin versus non-billable time. So this is stuff like, I don't know, training that you might be doing with your team, miscellaneous, or even new business is actually a really good example. That's a non-billable activity for the most part. So any of that training, team meetings, all business meetings, whips, any of that sort of stuff, that impacts that utilization rate that we were looking at before. So this number here, or these numbers here, this average team utilization, that's what percentage of their day is actually done or spent on billable client work. So for here, 80%, 8 hours out of every 10 being spent on billable client work. A benchmark to aim for is 70 to 80%. 100% is not achievable. It's just don't aim for it. You'll burn your team out. Below that, below 70%, you might start seeing some issues as well. Now, important to note that these numbers aren't team-facing KPIs. That's not what we're talking about here. We're not including them in role descriptions. This is a back-of-house measure that we use to figure out how busy the team is with client work, with billable work. So keep it back of house. And then finally, investigate how much time is going to context switching or distractions. This is going to that feeling busy as opposed to actually busy conversation. Context switching is super draining. So context switching here might mean switching clients, might mean switching industries, might mean switching task types. It might be that a Slack message has popped up and I was in the middle of deep work. The research says that to get into that focus mode, it's 15, 45 minutes, something like that to get into deep focus. If you're having to switch 3-4 times a day, that's a lot of wasted time trying to start focusing, and it's mentally draining. It's taxing as hell. So if you've got a team that has to context switch a lot, I would be looking at how we can better manage that so they don't feel as busy.
Yeah, I've got an interesting story from a client recently, and they are like high volume agency, so a lot of clients to manage, lower average client value. And one change they made in terms of this exact idea of how the team were shipping work was they had like, let's say a list of 30 clients to get through, and they had to get everyone through the process. Originally, they were doing like client 1, task 1, client 1, client 2, task 2. So working down the task order of context. And what they did, they worked out that actually switching to client as the context, so then just follow one client through the whole process in the chain, like made it so much more satisfying for the team member to like ship off a client and like tick that box. And so the productivity increased because of that. They changed, instead of doing, the row of task, they did the client across, and that seemed to work context wise. So like, I don't know if is there a magic bullet of what the context has to be, or do you reckon it's just find the flow that works for an agency?
No, I think find the flow that works. And that's such a good example as well. So, I mean, another example of that might be reporting, right? Like for lots of agencies, particularly kind of digital performance agencies, first week of the month is reporting week. Typically, you're punching out every single client report in that 1 week. So that's kind of minimizing context switching, right? But then your example about just doing all of client A, then all of client B, then all of client C, because it's less taxing for the team. That's a fantastic one that just shows that it needs to make sense for your business model. For an agency with lots of small clients, that might be the best way to attack the month.
Right.
Love it. Okay, so Michael, if we're confident we're doing everything right, put your CFO hat back on.
Okay.
We're still not hitting the targets. We're doing everything right. We're not hitting targets. Is this just a pricing issue then?
Look, we're not going to go into the depths of like how to price or the theory of pricing, but often, short answer, yes, often it is a pricing issue. And there's a certain inescapable law of gravity with a service business that founders need to understand and know what the floor is for their pricing. I'm not setting the ceiling. You can go as high as you want. If you can, that's awesome. That's great. Call it whatever you want. Value, output, I don't mind. But you also need to know where you can't go below, where you can't discount past, because that's where you're going to start, eroding margin, and it's not worth your time doing. So the very simple way I kind of talk people through it is to make sure that your charge out rates are high enough per team member, and you need to get an understanding of the core hourly cost of your billable team. That's all in, super, all in. And then you want to times that by at least 3.5 to 4 for your markup to what their charge out rate is to clients. And if that is in a decent ratio and you're hitting, the utilization goals that you just mentioned, that person is then going on to spend 70% of their week on billable work, then the math should work out and you have a business model in balance. And so making sure that at least they know the core of how they're building their pricing and quoting with that margin built in. But often people who come to me, the monkey in the room is may not be that. The monkey in the room may be like the founder's putting too much through the business. There's too much travel. Like, we've got to look at overhead too, right? That's something we haven't spoke about here. It's not, wage should be about 50% of where your revenue is going, but overhead is usually taking up about 20% of your revenue as well. So there may be things we need to cut there too as well. So that's worth mentioning from a CFO perspective. And then the third idea is like ghost time. So the stuff that you're not budgeting or pricing at all. A common one is like going too hard in onboarding and giving away too much value for free. That probably could or should be a strategy that you're charging for, or other parts that's a premium that you're not pricing that way. So are there things that you're giving away too much to impress people up front that you could or should be charging for as well? As it's not even on your planned resourcing because it's kind of just given away as well. So that's another idea.
A common one I hear, particularly on retainer-based engagements, are that, we spend more time up front to win the client and onboard them, but we make it up over the course of the engagement. So thinking then that it scales down, but then never checking that actually is the case. Never checking over 6 or 12 or 18 months that, months 6 through 18 are more profitable and make it up. So it nets out at a 25% net profit on that client, or whatever the metric might be. Never checking that. So if your assumption as an agency owner is, we make it up over the life of the engagement, but you're never checking that, you are almost certainly not making it up over the life of the engagement. So you need to go back and actually sense check that.
Absolutely. And I've seen like more recent war stories in the past quarter. I've had experience with a couple of brands that one of them took the proposal, the strategy where this agency went all in, like threw the kitchen sink at them, because they knew they weren't going to execute on this because they're the brand. You know what they did? They took it in-house. They were like, stuff it. Thanks for the plan. We'll have a crack ourselves. We'll get our internal person plus Claude to have a crack. And so like, I think agencies need to be aware of in-housing a little bit, or freelancers competing with freelancers, because you give away too much of your strategy up front. And I've got another example more recently as well about similar idea. They put a lot of stuff in up front, but then they're like, oh, sorry, you're too expensive. We're going to use a freelancer. So like, you need to protect yourself a little bit now. And strategy is becoming the more important thing, because the execution with AI, brands are playing around with it themselves as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Don't get me started on pitch requirements. That is a particular bugbear of mine, having spent many a night doing RFPs and working with a whole bunch of agencies that do the same.
Yeah.
All right. So we've spent a lot of time kind of setting up the capacity side of things, talking about these revenue leakages, talking about over-servicing. So Michael, from your perspective, how do we get more profitable without adding more headcount?
Yeah. Okay. So from the CFO lens, the business model view, there's only a few levers you can pull in a service business or in a product business, right? And increase prices, number one, we already spoke about it, right? Your charge out rate goes up because your prices have gone up, and that covers a lot of cracks as well. But in markets like right now, that's hard to do. It's a competitive market. It's tough. That's not easy just to do it. So if you're going to do it, don't do a blanket price increase for all your clients at once. Roll it out tactically, one by one, test and learn. Do not do an email blast that everyone's getting a 20% in the new financial year. So do that tactically. The next one is remove dead wood. So like audit your client list, rank them by the margin, how quickly they pay you, general pain in the arseness of them. They suck your energy out, and then reprice obviously the most painful on that matrix, or move them on. And that assumes that you have some sort of pipeline that you can swap in, do a one in, one out. So you're not having to increase your headcount because you're just improving your client list portfolio one by one. And so that increases your profitability without having to hire. You could do the same work just in less hours. So you spoke about like under servicing, but this is just more about like do the same output, but do it quicker with some sort of, I hate to say it, but AI, you could try, that's the catch-all now for every solution, but find efficiencies internally to do it. And stop. The obvious one that we've spoken about all of this conversation is stopping over servicing, right? And then the team have more hours because they're not throwing them away to take on another client. So you cut them off from that extra 5 hours and you fill it with another client. So that's another obvious way. And then the last but not least is like improve your team mix and the actual quality of your team. So I'm not talking about increasing your headcount overall. You could still have 10 or 15 full-timers. But if every team member was an A player, your productivity goes up. So, and I talk about staff restructures a lot with my clients, or hires. That's a big part of like forecasting and team and stuff. And founders can't see the opportunity cost of sticking with the dud for too long. Like they can't see what the A player delivers because they haven't met them yet. So there's this huge part of holding on to someone because it's a bit painful with hiring. Recruiters are expensive, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of like switching costs. But then when they find an awesome person in that role, they're like, my God. And so that's another way to increase your margin, because that A player will obviously have more output, increase your client retention, all those other positive things. So make sure your team are.
The opportunity cost point is such a good one. You're right. Like the number of times, I've done it before when I was running an agency, this person's 130 and we said the budget was 120, 115. Oh, I can't do that. And then you end up hiring that person down the track anyway after the first employee wasn't right. Yeah. And you figure out, the output is 50% higher. Yeah. Like, I'm getting so much more value out of this person just because they're more senior. So that opportunity cost is massive. And for I don't want to say dud employee, for the unsuitable employee for the business, I also have counseled many, many agencies on moving on poor fits. The only regret is ever, I should have done it sooner. Why did I hang on for so long? And then that just gets amplified when you get the right fit in the business, right?
Yeah, for sure. And like, I'm not talking about A players just in the senior roles. This is like A players across every seat in the org chart as well, right? It's like for that role, like I've had a client recently, they got 2 new juniors in and they are knocking the lights out. They are awesome. And they're like putting the more senior person to shame. They're like, we're having to have that awkward convo of like, do we need the senior? Because these juniors are awesome. So it's not like just the expensive senior, because that's a expensive, risky hire. It's like across the whole team list, right? The whole roster.
Yeah. I love to see that. Amongst all the Gen Z bashing, I love to see it.
Yeah, no, they're hungry, which is their main asset. Let's switch it. So that's the CFO lens, like business model, levers to pull. But what about from an operations perspective? Like, what does it look like to find margin without adding headcount from your perspective?
So I think the first one, and we have touched on it a couple of times, is reviewing your pricing model, particularly if you charge on hourly rates. Hourly rates, as a default, is a bad idea for an agency. They'll cap your margins at a maximum level, whatever the number you worked out with Michael. That's what your margin will be, and will never be higher. But it doesn't set a floor. So if you are over-servicing your clients, there's unlimited downside, but a very limited upside. There's no upside to you getting faster or more efficient or more productive. So move away from that model. It commoditizes the work that you do, and it's not difficult to take that first step, which is just obfuscating by this is our monthly retainer, and the back end maths is the hourly rate times the hours, but the client's just seeing the retainer. There are heaps of great resources out there around moving from hourly to output to outcome value or / value based pricing. So do some reading on that. Contracting in your annual rate increases. Everyone that is charging you as an agency, your subscriptions, your accountants, whatever, they will be increasing their fees at least annually, right? And we just accept it and expect it. But agencies are allergic to this. I think it should be in our contracts. So having some sort of CPI increase plus a couple of points in your contracts annually should be there. Now, there will be some pushback from some clients. That's fine, but at least we're now having that conversation and we can see where it lands. It is something that we should push for, though, because as we all know, our salaries are going up, or our team salaries, often not ours, our team salaries are going up every single year by 5-10%. All of our other expenses are going up by 5-10%. But if our average charge out rate is going up not at all, that's just coming out of your back pocket as the owner of the agency. So you need to watch out for that.
Yeah. And my magic number for that CPI increase, I feel like I've never seen pushback at like that 5 or 6% annual increase. But like, I feel like the client pushback seems to happen you get closer to 10%. They're like, whoa, 10%. What am I getting for that? But if you're just chipping away every year with like a 5%er, people find it hard to push back. They're like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So if you do them over 4 years, that's still 20% over that period. But if you don't do it at all, trying to hike it 20% 4 years later, you're going to get churn. So I love that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of every 4 year sudden massive rate increase, you will lose clients. You will.
Oh shit! We haven't been looking at pricing. We're a lot way behind. Sorry, we're a bit disorganized.
Yeah,
20%.
Yeah, that's it.
What else?
So the final one, and I think most important, and I recommend this to every agency that I work with, is systemizing upsells in the agency. Now, I don't think that everyone in the agency should be in sales. I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. And a lot of people I know in agencies are just allergic to the idea of doing sales. But I think you can work around that. I think you can still put them to work and still get great results. So my favorite tool to use here is quarterly business reviews, QBRs. So use them with clients. It's a quarterly report going to clients, presented to clients, that you go through what we'd planned, what did we do, what did we achieve, what will we do next, and then most importantly, cool shit. So that last one, in my mind, is the most important. That's kind of the reason for being of this meeting from my commercial lens. That's where your team is given free rein to say, if I could do anything for this client, anything that would benefit them, anything I think they'd like, that they get excited about, put it forward. Even if it's not something your agency can execute, if it's something you're going to need to bring in someone else or refer to a different partner or whatever, doesn't matter. The idea here is you get your team thinking, ideating, coming up with opportunities, getting your clients excited by your proactivity, by your ideas. Whether or not the first or second one results in revenue for you, immaterial. Eventually it will. Eventually one of those ideas are going to be something that you execute on. But since we've removed that sales element, we're focusing ideation and opportunity identification. Your team is just constantly trying to come up with these ideas. So the next step from that is to make it kind of easy. If we, again, accept the premise that the team probably doesn't love doing sales, make it easy for them to kick it off to someone who does do sales. The simplest one I've done is just set up a ClickUp form that goes directly to the sales team. The account manager punches in client, idea, hit go. And then the SOP, it's all with sales to then follow through, execute, and report back about what happened. So having that kind of systemized approach is what lets you start to forecast annual growth based on existing clients, that organic growth that you want from clients. And you should be targeting that every year. You should be aiming to grow for retainers every single year, 10%, 20% by adding new stuff, by getting your team to identify cool shit that they could be doing. Get them excited.
Yeah, and I can see that would also help with countering churn. Like when you're the agency that's coming with new ideas, you're showing that you're proactive and you're not just starting to like pitch them at the end of the 12-month or the 3-month contract. Like that, the feeling from the brand side of like, oh, you're thinking about us and how to improve it. I can imagine that's like a double positive, like we're upselling and they're also not churning.
Yeah, it's kind of a retention and growth strategy in one hit.
Yeah, yeah. And I just wanted to clarify the cool shit idea because I think that's an awesome idea. Is this just for like new sales for clients, or is this just to improve your client's life? Like, what's that? What's the category for?
It's things that we could do to improve our client's life, improve their business, even just that will make them excited.
Mm,
Like we've seen, so as an example, we've seen a similar business based out of the UK run this type of activation, this type of campaign.
mm,
We think there's something in that for you. Here's the core of an idea. Here's an agency I reckon could execute
yeah,
and get them to run with it. Like
yeah,
show them that you're thinking, show them that you care, and it gives the team a creative outlet as well without forcing them into the business development role that they might hate.
yeah. I think it's a super powerful idea.
Brilliant. Okay, that's most of the content. We've got a whole bunch of questions and we've got about 10 minutes or 5 minutes. So we'll try and get through a couple of them now. We'll do a few quick ones first. Michael, in the sub 50% benchmark for wages v revenue, are you including super?
Yeah, absolutely. When I look at a P&L, it's like team costs, super. I call that direct labor. Lump them all together, so you're all in team cost, and ideally that's below 50% of revenue. And that's elite though. If you're getting below 50% consistently, you're doing really well. If you're in the 40s, that's great. Most agencies probably pushing 55-ish since COVID. The wages jacked up and inflation's kicked in. So yeah, that is including super.
Yeah, cool. I know whenever I start working with a client and get into their financials, if I'm at the top of their P&L, if they've got kind of wages split out up there and I'm seeing, okay, at that 50% mark or that 40% mark, I know what the bottom of the profit and loss statement is going to look like. Unless there's something really weird going on with some of the operational costs, I know if they're hitting that top level margin number, then they're going to be making profit. They're going to be in a good place.
Yeah. And for my simple brain, like if they've got contractors who are basically full-timers, like they're part of the team, I'll lump them in the direct labor line as well to see like what our overall team cost is. You can split out them into subcontractors and track your gross margins separately. For me, I'm just like, what's our team cost all in? And I dump all them together because it's a simpler way to track how heavy are we. Because when you think restructures, you do think cutting subbies as well as team or hiring full-timers plus subbies. So yeah, that's another sub idea.
Yeah, cool. Michael, I've got a question in here a couple of times. What is client profitability analysis?
So client profitability analysis is connected to your effective hourly rate. So that concept we mentioned with, a client's paying you $100 per month to do something, and you budgeted 4 hours to do that. So, it's 100 divided by 4, which means your effective hourly rate is 25 across the, in reality, but your charge out rate should have been 50. So you've actually spent twice the amount of time that you should have. So you're comparing your effective hourly rate versus what the pricing and quoting charge out rate was for that client on a client by client level. And then you're working out how far off are we from the effective hourly rate, which is the actual hours spent, versus the budgeted charge out rate, which was that one that we're building up from people's core cost times 3.5 to 4 at least as a minimum. What's that compared to in reality what happened, and doing variance analysis across clients on that. So what's the dollar difference? What's the percentage difference? And what is that over months and months and months? So tracking that more interestingly over a period of months to see how that's trending and charging that gap.
And I know a lot of time tracking tools, you can get a decent idea of this as well. If you
most software should.
If you put the budget in for the client and you put the cost rates in for your team, you should be able to get that, but you need to be tracking time.
Yes.
All right, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to speed through a few questions now. With the employee to revenue ratio, wouldn't this shift based on salary, i.e. not a flat 200? Yes. It's talking about, we want to generate approximately $200,000 annually per FTE is absolutely just a number that we're looking at. It's not the sole number we're looking at. It's one of the collection of measures that we want to be looking at, the data points to identify where the problem might lie. As a comparison, I've looked at this before. Someone like an Alphabet or a Meta, their revenue generated per employee is like 100x or 1000x or something like that. At agencies, we're looking at 3x. So that $200,000 is absolutely contextual. It depends on the person. It depends on the business. If you've got a big offshore team, obviously that number looks different, but it's one of the data points to look at. Anything to add, Michael?
No, and like with all of these things, everyone tries to pull out like the one metric to rule them all. But as you said, it's like a prism where you look through it with a bunch of different lenses. And what's more interesting is your starting point when you're first looking at that metric. And are you trending the right way? Green light or red light? So it's more the trend as you try and make these improvements rather than the one number to hang yourself against. It's like the trend and a few different metrics to know that you're tracking the right way across a basket of metrics.
Yeah, nice. We're trying to build a picture. We're not looking at a single point in time. One point down here about, I'll read the question. Can you go into a bit more about why utilization of 70 to 80% should be used more for back of house measure versus team KPIs? So from my perspective, for the most part, the team doesn't have influence over how much billable work you as an agency have. They might be able to do the ideation, do all the stuff I talked about, but they don't have the influence of getting contracts signed. So to me, it's a back of house number rather than a number for them to aim at, because you do have influence there and you do have the ability to say the team is or isn't busy enough. We need to add people. We need to pull people back, something like that. So it's a back of house measure that allows us to make decisions rather than a front of house to try and force performance out of. If you think about it, the only way the team can increase that number, so this is the incentive that we're putting in place, the only way they can increase that number is by doing more client work that doesn't already exist. So over-servicing. Maybe they're just, twiddling their thumbs too much, too many meetings, whatever. Now they're doing more billable work. Hopefully you've caught that in some of the other measures rather than this one. Or you're incentivizing them to just lie, just make it up.
And that's why so many people don't trust what the timesheets, right? That's this stat that we pulled up. It was like, so many people don't trust it.
Yeah, we want that data to be as accurate a picture as possible so we can make decisions rather than trying to force behavior change by this one or two specific metrics. Sorry, there's two more questions in there. We're not going to have time to get to them today because I do want to finish before the hour. So I guess just to wrap it up, Michael, do you want to sum up for us?
So like the too long don't read, if you just joined in the last 2 minutes, firstly, you're very late. Secondly, it's recorded. But thirdly, I think the whole pitch from this webinar, thanks for joining, is like capacity problems, messy data, low profit, is hidden over-servicing is what we're talking about here. It's like you don't even know where the time is going. You don't even know what's happening in your agency. And that's what you need to fix. I think that's like a high-level summary. So Sam, I'll give you the idiot's guide to what we've just spoken about or what you're kind of talking through here and tell me if this is a good summary. You've got to collect good data, do something with it, so find some insights, and then take some action. Is that what we're talking about here?
It is. If there's one thing I could get people to do if they're not doing it right now, it's start tracking time and get those systems set up properly to start reporting automatically on client level profitability. Everyone here is running an agency. They're smart enough, they're bright enough, you're all switched on enough to actually make those decisions based on that data. But the most important thing is getting that data. Force yourself to start having some of those tough conversations by seeing where you're leaking revenue in your business. Yeah,
and I love that the operations expert has told us to systemize time tracking and then systemize upsells. So it's like, that's perfect.
You'd think I'd babble on about AI more than I do. All right. So that's all we've got time for. Everyone, thank you so much. Michael's right. You're going to get an email after this with a link to watch this back if you feel like picking up on something. There'll also be some contact info for Michael and myself if you've got any follow-up questions, but please connect with us on LinkedIn, flick us an email. Neither of us are the hard sell. We just want to help agencies thrive. So please do get in touch. Couple of things that we're working on at the moment. So I've got, pardon me, I've got an event in Brisbane next month for agency owners who are in Brisbane, a casual networking event for you all to get together and meet your peers at a fantastic venue in West End. So if you're keen to come along, want to find out more, flick me an email. Michael, you've got an indie agency report coming out.
Yeah, so I guess we teased it. This is the world premiere of some of that data, which is what we showed today. But we're working on a more comprehensive report, and that'll be released next month in May. So get in touch if you'd like to be on the list when we send that out to everyone. And then even more importantly, we do it every year. We'd love you to be part of it next year. So when I hunt you down and email you or DM you, please respond and be part of the survey so it can benefit all of us. So yeah, the surveys will be out next month. We'd love to share it.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed. Get in touch if you need anything. Have a great week.